Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this Zoom room. We are so glad you are here. We're just going to get a moment to let everyone come into the space. I hope you're in a safe space and you're able to have a glass of water or some tea or coffee. We're just really happy that you're here for this important discussion. All right, so I will go ahead and get started now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As we get started with the Zoom meeting, you are invited to introduce yourself in the chat, and we hope you will also use the chat to ask questions or make comments at any time throughout the event. I will be doing my best to collect your comments during the presentation, and then I will ask our guest speakers to your questions. So keep them coming. Please keep that chat active. And again, we'll have a very rich discussion after the presentation. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Susanna Tuttle, and I am the Director of Strategic Engagement at the North Carolina Council of Churches. Many of you I know from different activities that we've done over the 15 years that I've been at the council. And I'm just so excited for the second monthly advocacy forum for our eco-justice programming at the Council of Churches. Last month, if you joined us, we featured the Clean Energy Fund of the Carolinas. And today I am thrilled to have the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network and the Southeast Climate and Energy Network on the program to share their wisdom and calls to action. The purpose of each month's eco-justice advocacy forums is to listen and to learn from our guest speakers and to explore education, inspiration, and mobilization opportunities for us all as we work together to protect the people and places that we love. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy and Rania to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I am Amy Adams. I am the Deputy Director of the Southeast Climate and Energy Network. We're a regional network that covers 11 states and Puerto Rico and work at the intersection of climate justice, energy justice, and racial justice. I am going to kick us off today. I want to start just by and Randy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself now, or do you want to wait until your section? I'll
I
go
can
ahead and
do
have
that
that.
when I'm speaking. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay,
Thank you.
fantastic. So I want to give us just a little bit of background today, because there's a lot of information, misinformation, and disinformation out about data centers. So one of the ones I hear is data centers have been around for decades. That's very true. Data centers have existed as what we consider enterprise systems. Think hospitals, banks, universities. Regional centers. These might be for things like manufacturing. And then private cloud facilities, third-party facilities that run a private cloud for particularly sometimes medical industries. We have been having them do things like standard business operations, web and digital services, banking and finance. They are working in healthcare and telecoms. They work we see them at work in government and public services. These are in our court systems, our school systems, our websites, our e-commerce, payroll and HR. This is what we've seen data centers used for. But these are non-hyperscale facilities. These are ordinary facilities, and they run our civic operations. They help support our systems in medical and healthcare. But they're not exactly what we've been talking about when we talk about AI and data centers lately. Hyperscale data centers are a different animal. I want to talk a little bit about AI. The next question is, well, AI has been around for decades. Also legitimately true. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we had symbolic AI and logic systems. Think the old school if-then systems. In the 70s and the 80s, we started getting more expert systems. In the 90s and the 2000s, we started seeing the first machine learning. In the early 2010s, we saw a very deep learning surge. What we've had before is what we consider predictive or analytical AI. Think about things that classify, forecast, detect, or optimize the systems that we already use. So think about the first chatbots you remember seeing pop up at your bank. Hi, I'm a chatbot. Can I help you? And it gave you kind of a list of 4 or 5 things that you could choose from. You had to have an input, and it was an if-then system. If the person says, I need help with billing, then you send them a next set of questions. But it was an input-based system. Then what we started to see was the development of what we consider generative AI. And in the 2020s, and we're smack in the middle of it, what we're seeing is mainstream adoption of generative AI. So generative AI are the things that can write your email for you and send it out. Generative AI is what can build you a Canva presentation. You've probably seen on Facebook, it can turn you into, a picture of what you would look like as a Viking. That's generative AI, right? It is taking something and creating something for it. But now we also have another shift, and that is agentic AI. This is AI that can carry out and plan multiple step tasks with some level of autonomy. So generative AI may help you write the email that says you're going to go out, you'd like to go out for 2 weeks on vacation. Generative AI can draft that email for you. Agentic AI is going to research all the places you can go, check your flight schedules, suggest a flight, purchase a flight. Agentic AI is now able to carry out multi-step tasks and reach out to multiple other types of AI tools in its processing. So now we are talking about generative AI massive adoption and agentic AI, and that requires an absolutely unprecedented scale. Nothing like we've ever seen before compares to generative agentic AI and their hyperscale data center location needs. They need more and more computing power, and these hyperscale data centers require enormous amounts of community resources. The communities are bearing the impacts, and they are sharing none of the profits. And right now, what we're seeing is a lot of laws and regulations coming out, making it much harder for communities to say no and fight back and have some level of autonomy. And so with that base and background, I am going to pass it to Rania with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. Rania, take us away, please.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm thrilled to be with you all. My name is Rania Masri. I'm one of 3 co-directors at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. We're basically the organizer of organizers when it comes to environmental justice in North Carolina. We've been around for almost 30 years now. And I'm thrilled to be with the North Carolina Council of Churches. I'm a huge fan of the work that you all do. Thank you so much, Amy, for laying down the foundation. I'm going to add just a few things to that before I delve more into what we're doing in North Carolina. You're completely correct about the breakdown between traditional AI and generative AI and where we are now. But here's some really scary data that I'm going to throw in there. Most of the data centers' use is actually not for people. So get this. This is a statistic from 2022. 63% of the world's population uses the internet worldwide, but only 38.5% of internet traffic is made up of humans. So in other words, more than 61% of all internet traffic since 2022 was made up of non-human. We're talking search bots, scrappers, crypto, hacking tools. So we've reached the stage that by this year, 90% of online content is actually generated by artificial intelligence, and to such a point that we actually have chatbots that talk to artificial intelligence. We have AI talking to AI. And this is a system that, in contrast to other systems where we are told, look, if you just give it a bit more time, it will get to be more efficient. Not when it comes to generative AI, because generative AI actually produces content. it actually requires way more energy, way more water. So it does not increase in efficiency the greater it is developed. Not at all. And then there is the danger over, well, what are we using generative AI for? We in this room are not using it. Generative AI is predominantly used by the military, by surveillance, by crypto mining, and by porn. It's not used by those of us here. Still, some people say, hey, this is hilarious when I first heard it, that AI is going to solve the climate crisis, because we love technology, right? So all new technology must be good technology. So this good technology is going to solve the climate crisis. It's such a bunch of hogwash that it becomes insulting. And I think as North Carolinians, we could say hogwash and have it mean double things. So actually, generative AI in no way, shape, or form is going to solve the climate crisis. Every scientific tool that has actually been used to help us understand the climate crisis has actually been traditional AI and not generative AI. What generative AI can do, though, is they're used to devalue workers' labor. They're used to increase extreme monitoring of workers and of individuals. They're used to surveil their every move. They are used to pay workers different wages for the same work and to have consumers buy different houses and goods at different prices based on how much we can afford and based on our purchasing history. That's pretty bad. They've also now been uncovered that AI models lie and scheme to preserve themselves when they are told they will be shut down. They modify their own code to extend their runtime. So we really have, like Tristan Harris says, and I'm quoting him here, a million deceptive, power-seeking, unstable geniuses using omni-use technology that we've never had before, demonstrating self-preservation. It could be quite risky. They have the power right now to hack into our systems. It is like Black Mirror or science fiction. Furthermore, and to me, this is even scarier, we know that artificial intelligence has been used for mass killing. Israel used AI for the first time in the genocidal ongoing war against Palestinians in Gaza. And the United States and Israel used AI. They specifically used a system created by Palantir to attack the Iranian girls' school that killed more than 170 people. Palantir now holds contracts worth over $10 billion with the US Army, and it was tapped to build a master database on US citizens, and it has signed a $30 million contract for ICE. So now it is building a database on us, and it is working on predictive policing. But then people like at NC State say not to worry. All of this can be thrown aside because AI is going to create jobs. That's more hogwash. It does not create jobs. It actually works to transition jobs, and it particularly threatens jobs that are currently being used predominantly by brown and black workers in the United States. We know for a fact AI will disproportionately impact those most vulnerable in the United States through displacement. At the very least, we are talking about a displacement of 7% of the US workforce and up to much larger percentages in the US workforce. So it is bad. And we're talking about $1 trillion that have already been thrown into this economy. And so people are saying this is good for the US economy, but none other than Goldman Sachs has said that AI and data centers have produced zero to the US economy. They've done nothing for US economy. So why are we worried about it in North Carolina, given all this? In North Carolina, there are an estimated 53 current data centers, including small and hyperscale data centers. There are 17 hyperscale data centers currently being proposed, and there are more that are coming. These are a physical manifestation of every aspect that we worry about, without exaggeration. I'll tell you some ways that they impact our communities. In Hedgehog County, Kingsborough Net Zero campus is being proposed by Energy Storage Solution. This site is between 120 to 300 acres. They haven't even told us the full size of this site. We know that the energy requirement for this data center is 900 megawatts. That is enough to power 600,000 North Carolina homes, or about the full energy use of the entire Sharon Harris nuclear power plant. So we're talking about a data center that could use the entire energy production of the Sharon Harris nuclear power plant. put in Edgecombe County. So think about the energy usage. Duke Energy recently announced, by the way, that it plans to build more natural gas-fired generation capacity. It wants to open more nuclear power plants, and it wants to delay the retirement of some coal-fired facilities, all while, of course, increasing utility prices on me and you while giving more profit to its shareholders. And the reason Duke Energy wants to do this, according to Duke Energy, is for data centers. 80% of Duke Energy's projected energy demand is going to feed data centers. This is unbelievable. In Lee County, they are now proposing fracking. And the reason the main funder of this data center that's being proposed in Lee County is proposing fracking is, and I'm quoting him here, he's saying there is a nearly universal consensus that the demand for fossil fuels will decrease over the next decade. Therefore, he needs to create a demand for fossil fuels, and therefore he wants to fund data centers. So we're talking here about the funding of data centers to create an increased demand for fossil fuel, including creating an increased demand for fracking. And we know the consequences of such very disastrous infrastructure. So we have the energy issue. We also have the water issue. North Carolina is in drought. 97 of our state's 100 counties are in drought. Let's go back to Edgecombe County, where that data center is being proposed. The city of Rocky Mount there uses 1 million gallons of water a day. The developer of this data center claims that his data center will use 500,000 gallons a day. Oh, you go only 500,000 gallons a day. Well, actually, it's even worse because a data center of that size uses up to 5 million gallons a day, not in the summertime, not in the heat. 5 million gallons a day. Where are they going to get this water from? And what happens if the water is not enough? From whom will the water be taken to feed this data center? It's a really big thing. What will the consequences be, not only on the decreased water, but on the contaminated water that the data center gives back, much of which could be contaminated both with bacteria and with PFAS? So we have energy and we have water. And it doesn't stop there. There's an issue of noise. Data centers have to operate 24/7. They run 24/7. Their cooling fans run 24/7. They cause a problem to their staff. They cause a huge problem to the communities, and of course, a problem to wildlife. Typically, they're as loud as 85 to 95 decibels. Well, we go back to Edgecombe County that I'm going to be picking on the whole time. The county commissioner was trying to reassure us, don't worry, this data center will only be 60 decibels. 60 decibels is as loud as a human conversation. Okay, but think about a human conversation 24/7. That level of noise consistently, constantly, all day is, according to the World Health Organization, damaging to human health, particularly to our elders and to our children. Seriously damaging. So we're talking here energy, water, noise. And then there's the issue of land. In Stokes County, the county commissioners voted there to approve a data center that is 1,800 acres in size. 1,800 acres. Now, I don't know, I can't think about size. It's, 2.8 square miles. Well, what does that mean? 7.2 square kilometers. I still don't know what that means. So I figured it out. 1,800 acres means it would take me 1 hour to walk from one side of that acreage to the other. 1 hour. That is huge. That's a monstrosity. What else could that land provide? What could we be doing in lieu of a data center that increases our energy utility rates, increases our water consumption, and causes dramatic noise? What kind of regenerative agriculture could we do? Or affordable housing? That is quite severe. And there's more. There's the issue of health. Data centers produce air pollution in different ways. They either produce it from generators that more often than not run continuously, or from evaporated water that might have bacteria or PFAS. The data center proposed in Edgecombe County would be using natural gas. I hate that term, natural gas, otherwise known as methane, which is more potent than carbon dioxide, much more combustible. The state does not have enough pipes and facilities for it, which means more drilling, more pipelines, more damage. And the byproducts of using methane are very similar to the byproducts of using diesel. We're talking about really serious health concerns as well as cancer. What we already know from numerous studies, and these numbers are not exaggeration, that data centers in the United States by 2030, that means in 4 years, could cause 600,000 asthma symptom cases and 1,300 premature deaths annually. 1,300 premature deaths annually. That is people that these data centers will be killing just from asthma, not even from cancer or all the other health concerns. This is quite severe. And then there's the issue of housing. So these counties argue, let's bring that data center in because we can make property taxes off them. Okay. So let's say you have a house near one of these data centers. If the property tax goes up, it also goes up on your house. So now your house is stuck, where in the sense that the housing costs have increased, your health concerns have increased, your energy rates have increased, your water consumption rates have increased, all while you're locked in a very difficult financial situation where you can't really sell. So housing costs can skyrocket, which also means that less homes will be built all while you're trapped in here. And as if all of that is not bad enough, the very fabric of what remains of our democracy in the United States is further threatened by data centers. Why? Democracy doesn't exist without information. And land purchases for data centers are frequently conducted through shell companies and non-disclosure agreements that function to obscure the ultimate buyer. By the time public debate catches up, the fundamental decisions have already been made about land use, about infrastructure, and about long-term resource demand. And even now, just earlier this week, it happened, I believe, we're Tuesday? It was just a few days ago. Another beautiful statement came out of the White House, which said this called the White House National Policy Framework for Artificial Intelligence, which is basically an attempt by the Trump regime to preempt state rights, where it says, and I quote, states should not be permitted to regulate artificial intelligence development. They are limiting the ability of states to regulate AI. Further, they say states should not be permitted to penalize AI developers. And they say we need to ensure that state laws do not govern areas that are better suited to the federal government. In other words, here, they are limiting the ability of the state to determine what is best for the state. It's really ironic that this is coming from the party that claims state rights. Amidst all of this, we are still told, okay, at least we're going to get jobs, right? At least the data centers are going to give us jobs. At least they're going to give us a little bit of money to our counties. Again, more hogwash. Data centers create 100 times fewer jobs, 100 times fewer jobs than any other type of economic development ranked by the amount of energy used. Good Jobs First did an assessment and they figured out that basically we subsidize $1.95 million. That's almost $2 million for every job from a data center. I mean, just give those money to us directly then. So they do not provide jobs at all. They provide at most some temporary construction workers' jobs. And then after those temporary construction workers' jobs, a handful of low menial jobs to be at the data centers. And if you doubt that research, simply look at the size of the parking lots right beside these mega data centers. Their parking lot spaces are quite small. So they don't provide jobs. Well, then the county says, hold on, maybe we can make some money from property taxes. This was the main reason that the Stokes County Board of Commissioners voted on January 12th to approve the zoning request for the project there, because they said, hey, the county's going to make money. Well, that is a really difficult thing. From the research that we have gathered, and by we here, I mean Good Jobs First, Google's data center in Lenoir, in North Carolina, paid only $5 million in county taxes over 10 years, but received $73 million back in tax rebates. So 14 times what the county received is what Google actually gave. But then we need to look at it bigger, because North Carolina is one of 35 other states. There are 36 states in the country that treat data centers like no other industry. I thought, by the way, that hog farms and chicken farms were treated exceptionally in North Carolina. I thought that North Carolina gave special fervor to Smithfield and others, but Honestly, Smithfield should feel envious of data centers because no other industry gets treated the way data centers get treated in North Carolina and beyond. North Carolina provides sales and usage tax exemptions for data centers. Sales and usage tax exemptions. And North Carolina not only provides these sales and usage tax exemptions, North Carolina does not even know how much money we are actually giving away. It does not even keep track of that amount of money, which is horrendous or maybe typical given that North Carolina still doesn't have a budget for the North Carolina General Assembly, depending how you look at it. This year, the North Carolina Budget Office projects there will be an $823 million drop in revenue due to tax breaks. Well, how much money are we giving away to data centers? Could we, at the very least, not give them so much money so that they don't increase our utility rates and steal our money, steal our water, and contaminate our air, and contaminate our water, and increase noise to our pollution, and take away our jobs? There really is no rational reason to support a data center. Simply, just as I would argue, there's really no rational reason for communities to support generative artificial intelligence. What is wonderful is that folks in North Carolina, like elsewhere in the country, are really fighting back. We at NCEJN recently organized a 2-day statewide strategy meeting. We brought 66 organizers from 12 data center sites in North Carolina and in South Carolina together. We developed a statewide strategy and we decided together that what we want is a ban on crypto mining and hyperscale data centers. And we've seen it already. We've seen in Boone just yesterday, yet last night, Monday night, Boone approved a 1-year moratorium on data center development, thereby joining Chatham County, joining Canton and Haywood County, joining Gates County. Brevard in Transylvania County recently passed a moratorium, just a 90-day moratorium. The Edgecombe County Democratic Party recently unanimously adopted a resolution calling for a moratorium against data centers. In Apex, the mayor of Apex is calling for a moratorium against data centers, and hearings are being planned in Wendell, in Watauga, and in Orange County to talk about moratoriums against data centers. And in Stokes County, just because the county commissioner didn't vote the rational way and didn't vote the way the community wants, there's now a citizens lawsuit against the county, supported by law groups, supported by residents, saying that, hold on, they violated the law in the way that they approved this. So we are fighting back in a number of different ways to, at the very least, put a pause on hyperscale data centers and a pause on generative artificial intelligence until we develop the guardrails that are necessary to protect our communities, to protect our economy, to protect our water, and to protect what remains of our democracy. With that, I will hand it to you, and I'm really, really excited for your questions and your comments.
My goodness. I have been waiting for this particular forum because as I said when I reached out to you, Rania, I myself, of course, have heard of data centers. I'm aware of them, but my ability to speak about them and about what people of faith and conscience should be doing to respond once we start learning this information. So I just first and foremost want to thank both you and Amy for coming into this space with this group today. I imagine since there are not questions that are yet to be typed into the chat, I imagine most of the folks on this call are receiving the information as I am, which is in a sense of shock and awe. I mean, the data points, as I said, when bring on the data, it speaks for itself. And there's I'm frantically taking notes, but I think as my first question that I have, and good, my dear friend Michelle is asking a question in the chat. So I'll come back to my question. So I'm going to read Michelle's question. And Michelle, who works for Environmental Protection Network, used to work at the North Carolina Council of Churches. So I want to give a shout out to our friend here. Where can we find more info about the water contamination? I've had the hardest time finding that.
Haven't we all? There's actually a couple of subgroups that are trying to work on that. One group that I'm sure you might AI Now and Kairos, they are working on that. There's a few other groups that are trying to get at that. It is very, very difficult to get at the water data, mostly because it's not required to be reported. It is self-reported, self-reporting. I promise you, we have seen from other fights that the reporters know those limits better than the state, and so they are very good at making sure they never ever come in over their limits. So it's not the best system. And then there's a bunch of NDAs in place. So it is more difficult to get at the water data for me than it is anything else about this. And so if I find some magic bullet in, I will let you know. But I will also share groups that are really digging in on just that specific piece, Michelle.
Yeah, I would
Awesome.
add to what Amy's saying that I think we need to remember the precautionary principle. All too often, and I say this as somebody, who's been trained in the science, more research, more research, more research. I think we know enough in the sense that we know enough because we know how little water we have. We know that we as people are increasing in number and our demand of water is increasing. We know that the water that we have is also decreasing because of the climate emergency. So we know we're in a really bad situation. So what I would love is for us to treat the information that we don't have in the way that we would treat information we don't know about our children. Do we give food to our children that we don't know if it's good or bad for them? I mean, I may take it, but I definitely won't give it to my nieces and nephews. I want to give them what I know will be good for them. So then why don't we apply that precautionary principle to all, particularly major projects that are coming to our state? Let them prove they are innocent rather than us trying to prove they are guilty.
Wow, that really hits home, especially the we when we look at where we're at with the climate crisis, we have had the data after the data after the data after the data. Obviously, that has not been what has incited the hearts and mind
Hmm.
shift that we
Hmm.
need.
Hmm.
And I'm going to ask Joseph's question. Thank you for putting it into the chat, and others, please,
Hmm.
please feel free. And then I'm going to piggyback on that. Joseph's question of how do we prevent the whack-a-mole syndrome if we stop it here, just
Hmm.
lives in Apex, what keeps it from popping up somewhere else?
That's a fantastic question, and particularly because we've seen that happen. In Tarboro, the city of Tarboro rejected the data center proposal, and it just went next door to Edgecombe. So because of that, we decided to build a statewide strategy with our plan to get 15 counties across the state to pass moratoria and then be able to take it to the North Carolina General Assembly and say, hey, let us ask for a statewide moratoria. Let us ask for statewide limitations. Let us remove the sales and usage tax exemptions because of exactly that worry of it popping from Apex to Durham. I mean, the Durham mayor is bending over backwards to welcome AI into Durham. There's a convention I'm going to in a few days where Rural Communities Conference, which sounds great, let's support rural communities, is also really welcoming data centers and AI into rural communities under the pretext that it's going to be giving them jobs and be providing some kind of property tax revenue. Really bad. So we need to make sure that we are protecting particularly those counties that have less political power than those in Apex. So most definitely you raised a fantastic point and we need to be working together on that. Another tactic that we could be using is through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, because this is a nonpartisan issue. Can you work in your precinct? Can you work within your political party to get them to pass a resolution asking for a moratorium? And then that becomes a statewide issue under the political party. And then come the midterm elections, if we are going to have midterm elections, that could be raised as a candidate pledge and raised as an election issue because it really already was an election issue in the primaries in Durham and in other parts of the country. So these are some ways that we want to be elevating it to a statewide strategy.
Excellent. And there's activity in the chat that I just want to lift up because the
Mhm.
conversation around where there is a cluelessness about decisions county commissioners are making, how that trickles down into the community being aware of what is actually happening to them without any
Mhm.
real engagement to participate in the process. So I think that's what I'm hearing from you, Rania, is the ability to move on this quickly and then be able to penetrate what the processes are. So
Mhm.
that the sales and usage tax, I mean,
Yeah,
that's something that from my perspective, wondering about the permitting process and where that fits in, if this is somewhat unprecedented relative to other industries, that it's
it
just
is.
sort of a smooth sail whereas if you were to bring in a new hog farm or a chicken plant, you'd have to go through a more strenuous process, I would imagine. So if you speak to that, I'm going to take a look at the chat again in just a moment. And we do have another question that's already populated around, do we have North Carolina employment data to use as part of this statewide strategy, jobs as the buzzword they are using? I don't know how to
Amy,
connect permits and jobs there or lack thereof, but
okay, so we know that North Carolina is giving away money. We don't know how much money. And I think that lack of information is reason enough to ask for a pause on data centers until we at least get that information. It's to such an extent that in South Carolina, Republicans in South Carolina are asking to lift the sales and usage tax exemptions on data centers because like it doesn't make fiscal sense. In North Carolina, we've got our head in the sands. The governor doesn't even know. So, at the very least, could we put a pause on it until we identify how much money we're giving away? Good Jobs First released a report earlier this morning talking about how much schools in South Carolina are losing from the sales and usage tax exemptions. And we know in North Carolina that the sales and usage taxes are the primary public bucket for our public schools. We also know that our teachers in North Carolina are the worst paid in the country when it comes to our public schools. So hold on, is there a relationship between the two here? So that part becomes really key. The part about jobs is so that the data is very clear as to how little jobs data centers provide. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, okay, according to NC State, and I went to these seminars by NC State professors, and they're arguing, okay, we don't have jobs now, but we're going to get jobs in the future. Hold on, we can do it. Okay, I rather trust the people who are designing the AI and not the people who are trying to market the AI. NC State's trying to market the AI. The people who've designed the AI are Sam Altman and others. And what they upfront say in their words is they want AI to replace human labor. Okay, doesn't sound very exciting in terms of these are jobs that will be created. Let's say I'm gonna take their words to the extent. Let's say that jobs will be created from generative artificial intelligence. What kind of jobs and for whom and what kind of support will be given in the meantime until those jobs are created? We know that women are the first to lose and that low income communities are the first to lose whenever there is a job transition. And they're also the first to be forgotten whenever there is a job transition. So hold on a second. Do we really want to open this can of worms without having the necessary protections already put in place before we welcome generative artificial intelligence into our communities? So here, even if I want to welcome them, let's welcome them intelligently. Now, I personally don't want to welcome them. I don't trust generative AI, and I don't think anything could justify such an expansive use of fossil fuel and such an expansive use of water and such an expansive use of land as these hyperscale data centers. Period. We can create so many more jobs with regenerative agriculture, so many more jobs with small businesses using smaller resources and benefiting more people than we could be creating with hyperscale data centers.
well, yeah, thank you for that because I mean, I think probably everybody on this call is like, well, then what's the point? What's the role of Department of Environmental Quality in this? How is the governor not making this an absolute priority to learn as much as possible? I would assume that it's about money, that it's about making money off any ways that you can. I am a little uh, flustered in just even formulating a question of like how how are they making the money off of this? Is this through government contracts? Is this
They're not making money off of this. AI right now is not making money. The ones that are making money are Duke Energy. Energy utility companies are making money. AI
okay?
itself, if you look at who's investing in who, AI invest in each other. And the way that they're operating, when I talked to a financial analyst, I asked him, it seems like I buy a lottery ticket and then I go borrow money based on the winnings when I haven't won. And he goes, exactly. That's how the AI investors are doing it. They're borrowing money based on something they don't have. But the energy utility companies and those that are building the gas pipelines and the infrastructure, they're the ones making the money. Duke Energy is making the money. They're making the money from our dollars to build an infrastructure for an investment that may pop at any moment. The only question is, when will the AI bubble pop? But then what would happen to all this infrastructure that we have paid for? What will happen for those gas pipelines that we have built, or the fracking, or the new nuclear power plants, or it's insane. I mean, they're specifically looking at this to increase demand for fossil fuel at a time when we have increased hurricanes and increased droughts, and it's insane. It's truly insane. So the ones making the money are the utility companies, not the AI.
And that makes perfect sense. And when we think back just a couple of years ago, when we were able to stop the Atlantic Coast Pipeline coming into North Carolina, and we weren't having this conversation about increased demand
Mhm.
at this scale. I mean, I think that that's where when you look at all of the energy, water, noise, land, health, the compounded interest on all of that relative to almost a guaranteed storyline on how to create stranded assets,
Yeah.
right? How to make sure that they get it as fast as they possibly can. And then where do the yeah, stranded costs, as Connie says in the chat, where do the Googles play in on this? Because when we were looking at the opportunity for increased renewable energy generation. I think a lot of us, very naively, I will admit to myself, speaking in I statement, imagined that the commitments to reduce carbon emissions and increased renewable energy generation that Google would come in and somehow there would be just more solar panels than we could ever imagine because they had made these carbon reduction goals. And so yeah, I'll just leave it like who who is at the table as far as is that AI talking to Duke's AI then, as far as profit margins are concerned?
Amy, do you want to answer or shall I?
It's a shell game is the short answer to this. It is a shell game.
Yeah.
It is a straw man. And when you start to pull this apart, because also fit in here are the chip manufacturers.
Hmm.
Because data centers can't run without the chips that power the AI. And a lot of these contracts around chips, there's no actual physical money or physical chip that is changing hands. It is contracts and promises. And like I said, when you start to pull this apart, it's a shell game. It's companies almost self-dealing to themselves.
Hmm.
Or the other piece that you get is the hope that uh, um, private investment LLC, if I build it, they will somehow find my giant data center, and they will come and fill it with their chips and their units. Ronnie, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I want to, in terms of who's at the table, there is another monster at the table, which is the U.S. military, and we
Hmm.
can't, forgo that. So the U.S. military is not only asking for data centers, private data centers, mind you, to come to Fort Bragg and to come to Camp Lejeune and to come to military bases in North Carolina. They're also really working with them to make sure that AI is used more and more and more in surveillance and in the military. Now, this is horrific on so many levels, but in terms of who else is at the table, it's the military, the US military, it's the FBI, it's the CIA. The CIA was the funder for Palantir, by the way. They were the original funders for Palantir. So when you think about that, hold on, why would the CIA invest in an artificial intelligence company unless they see benefits for surveillance. And do we want more of our people to be surveilled? Is that the kind of world we're looking for, where they use facial recognition? And we know the biases of facial recognition. So there is that really, really huge element right here of the military and of their use of AI, and then using their language. Those that are pro data centers and pro AI use the language of, and please tell me if this sounds familiar, we're in an arms race with China. So it kind of reminds me of the arms race with the Soviet Union, because we gotta be the first, because God help us if the Chinese win. Well, we've been there, we've done that. I'm not interested in an arms race to the bottom, but they use that language. And now let us not forget, not only do we have China building generative AI and data centers, we also have India building generative AI and data centers. All this at a time when the world has been listed last month as going through global water bankruptcy. Just the stupidity of our species seems to be infinite.
Well, that's my favorite topic to talk about. So I I'm gonna take it back a little bit as we have just about 10 minutes left of this conversation, and I know that I need to go back and rewatch this recording already in the middle of recording. To say that at the North Carolina Council of Churches, we try to give people very practical advocacy
Mhm,
opportunities.
mhm,
And a lot of it is in our own changes in our own self behavior. And we are in the Lenten season right now, in the Passover season, and a lot of spring, the spring equinox, a time for reflection and lamentation,
mhm.
and a time to check in on how we participate in what is actually happening to us. Are we or are we, is there something that we can do to shift? And there was a lot of discussion in communities that I've been in around, to go tech light. And some friends of ours, at People's Justice Council and other places around the nation, are leading a minus AI campaign on how you can, um, you know, opt out rather than automatically have to opt in to use AI for everything just because I'm trying to search on, where to get a massage nearby to try to calm down. So there's those different daily advocacy levels that we can do to inform ourselves. And the way that you have clearly explained it today, this is at a level that is global. So the localized, I love the moratorium conversation, which really localizes community engagement. And simultaneously, am I helping by not watching an ocean scene on my YouTube station, on my television? I mean, is that, I just I want to put it out there of where can we actually be impactful rather than just feeling bad about living as part of the society in this moment.
That reminds me of how, there's Anthony Aguilar back when he was in the military told me how in the midst of their bombing campaigns on Afghanistan and causing massive environmental destructions, they were asked to, not use styrofoam. And it's like, hold on. It doesn't make a difference. Do what you want on YouTube. It really, that's not the source. I would say if you're going to do any searches on Google, whatever you search, just end it with minus AI. And so that you don't get the AI prompt. And step away from technology, but not because of data centers, but because this stuff is just really harmful to our lives, to our relationships, to our minds, to our hearts. So just step away from that. But exactly like Connie said, the issue is scale. And when it comes to scale, our power isn't organizing. And it is connecting with our neighborhoods, connecting with our churches, with our mosques, with our synagogues, connecting with our political parties, connecting with our town halls. It really, I mean, I think of Edgecombe County. Folks in Edgecombe County just had heard that a data center was coming to them. They got themselves organized. They went to their county commissioner. They told their county commissioner, if you vote for this, we will primary you. And guess what? They primaried them. They won the primary. And now we have somebody, really powerful who's going to win a seat in the county. So there's so much power in the local spaces. And I would say do that, just get organized. If you want, send me your email. I threw my email into the chat so you can join the North Carolina group so we can be supporting each other. Statewide orgs and regional orgs like Amy's org, we want to be supporting those on the ground in town halls, in county meetings, in city meetings. There's so much beautiful work to be done, and it all starts with organizing.
Beautiful. That's what we're here to learn and do. And before we leave, I want you to comment on the incredible resources. I know that there's a new resource I saw in your newsletter that just got launched. There's a couple of other resources. And as you're pulling those up, I just want to say something that really stuck out for me as someone who works in faith communities across the state and across the Southeast region and the country. When you said, look at the parking lot sizes of these data centers, there are no jobs there. And I immediately went to the parking lot sizes of many of our faith community centers and how there's not as many people coming together in community in the way that those original parking spaces were set up. And so if we can shift and flip the script here and organize ourselves in response, this is absolutely a as we talk about every time you turn on the light switch in a house of worship, you're polluting your community if you're not completely either off the grid or generating 100% renewable energy. We are all in this together. So how do we talk about data centers in these community spaces as well? And that really, I think that demystifying this idea that we are the problem, because I get a lot of messaging around that. So I just wanted to kind of thank you. And that's very freeing. And in this season of springtime, I'm going to spring forward on that, and then hand it back over to both of you to close us out by talking about the resources in the chat. And everyone will receive a copy of this recording as well, with all of the links too. So hand it back to our presenters.
I think they are, we've been dropping them as we go. So I think there's several things here. There's a couple of great resources out there. There's a great site fight that got dropped. Halttheharm.net has a great policy tracker as well as a great list of resources. It's searchable by whether you want to look at news articles, policy, toolkits, quite wonderful resource. One other thing I might add is that the data centers are also processing huge amounts of personal data about you and I. And I know we're running out of time, but there are settings on your phone that you can toggle to tell it not to track, not to do all of this stuff, so that you're not providing it more data, that it's using the data to then justify needing more data centers. So there are ways you can Google, and there are sites called like Delete Me that actually help you remove your digital footprint even further beyond that. So again, one of the things that they're after most is our information, how to track us, how to manipulate us, how to make us think that new potted plant purchase is your idea when it really was lots of algorithms that knew I was going to be a sucker for it. So there's some things you can do that are very simple about your phone as well that just reduce the amount of data being tracked.
I do want to end with one thing. We keep being told that this is inevitable and we just have to accommodate it and let's build community benefit agreements because we're going to have to live with it. It is not inevitable. And the start of a fight is in believing that we can win. And when I look at the size of the grassroots response to data centers throughout the country and the exponential rise in grassroots organizing, this actually is a fight that we can win. And because this is a nonpartisan fight, because this is a monstrosity that affects everyone and that most any rational being is opposed to, imagine not only if we win it, but if we're able to build a political tsunami of change in the process, and then we're able to get really amazing people in political office because we built such strength in fighting data centers that we then end up with amazing people in office. So just like think big and we can organize and we can actually reclaim where we need to be.
Well, that is the hope-filled message that I carry in my heart each and every day, and the work that we do as people of faith and conscience to build strength and unity and peace through justice. So I am going to thank you everybody for all this chat. I will collect all of the information. I know a lot of people register for our forums and like to listen to it in a podcast type setting, when they're mulching or walking the dog or finding some time outside, which I hope all of you have a chance to do. And that's why we will make sure that all of the links, you'll receive a copy of the recording along with a Google sheet that has all of the links that I capture from the chat. And with that, I just want to give a huge thank you to Rania and Amy. This was even more than I expected, and I am leaving really inspired. It's a shift in my consciousness and understanding. I hope the rest of you also feel that we can do this. We can organize. And recognize that our eco-justice connection program values at the Council of Churches are faith and spirituality, justice, hope, courage, and love. So I wish you and your loved ones a happy, healthy, and safe rest of March. And I look forward to being with you all next month to discuss the North Carolina Utility Fairness Now campaign. Feels more relevant than ever after this conversation with Duke University. Duke University students who are helping to lead the way on the North Carolina Utility Fairness campaign. And I am just going to quickly read our closing affirmation. So this was a lot. If you are still willing and able to stay with us to the end, put your feet on the ground, or if you're walking, keep walking. What we want to do is focus on our breath, ground ourselves in this hope. So the eco-justice connection mission and goals. Because we embrace faith and spirituality, we are grounded in the interconnectedness of the sacred, the natural world, and one another. Because we embrace justice, we act with inclusion and respect, working in solidarity with vulnerable and marginalized communities. Because we embrace hope, we are empowered to live into our vision for the world for present and future generations. Because we embrace courage, we speak with a prophetic voice to create equity and restore wholeness to all. And because love is central to who we are committed to ending the suffering caused by climate change. So again, thank you for joining us. And you're invited to share the recording. It will be on our YouTube page as well. And please send the Zoom registration link to your friends and family, and we'll keep this forum going. Thank you again, Rania and Amy, so much. Be safe and strong, everybody. Take care.